Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, the CEO of Boardroom Resources, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the show. We have a special guest today, somebody who I go back a good 20 years at least with, and somebody that has certainly made a mark in both the legal and the boardroom paradigms. So let me introduce, without further ado, my guest today, Ben Heineman Jr., who's the former Senior Vice President, General Counsel for General Electric. He's an author. He taught at both Harvard and Yale. He won every Lifetime Achievement Award that they give for internal legal or governance stuff. He's a great thought leader in governance, and most recently has penned a new book titled The Inside Counsel Revolution, Resolving the Partner and Guardian Tension. Welcome, Ben.
Great to be here, TK. Great to see you again.
So it seems like I have to at least, this is no small book, and I've had the chance to read an advanced copy, but so first of all, we have to touch on why the book.
The book is aimed at inside lawyers here and abroad, both today and tomorrow, but it's also aimed at board members and CEOs because there's been a revolution in two senses. General counsels are now as important as CFOs because of the importance of business and society issues. Secondly, that's inside the company, and secondly, they become terribly important outside the company because they've shifted power from law firms to legal departments to control costs and to manage matters. And general counsels are now also the spokespeople for companies in a public sense. They become public figures and have very dominant roles in legislation, regulation, public affairs, ethics, and things like that. So for those two reasons, both inside and outside the company, I wanted to set this out as an important change in the way major corporations are governed. So
let's take this revolution. How has it impacted? How has it helped companies? Sort of give us the background.
I think the main way it's helped companies is that basically you've got outstanding lawyers, the lawyers who are now inside the companies and the general counsels on down there, former attorneys general of the United States, former head of the SEC Enforcement Division, former federal judges, former senior partners in law firms. These are hitters. These are big players. They are true partners of the board and the CEO on a whole range of issues, legal issues, but also a range of business, risk, and other issues. And so by being partners, they are incredibly important to the future of the company. But they also have a critical role of being guardians. And one of the things I talk about in the book is the importance of fusing the two roles, being partner to the CEO, but ultimately being guardian of the company. And that's something that the boards truly appreciate because, as we know, a number of boards have had some problems when the companies have not performed well.
Well, let's melt that down a little bit because you've touched on that, but let me ask it in a different way. When I was president of the bank, I always thought that the GC worked for me, okay? I'm sure the board thinks that the GC works for them, okay? And in a way, this is your point, it's a partnership that they have. But in the end, okay, and this is where I think this is not clear, okay? In the end, that GC has a responsibility to the corporation, okay? And what makes their job so tough in my mind is balancing all these expectations from these parties and yet walking that fine line with the corporation.
You couldn't have said it better. That's absolutely right. They are definitely partners to the CEO, but they're guardians of the company, and they technically represent the company. They do not represent the CEO. And the first time you have to tell the CEO that, and they kind of blink their eyes and look at you, you have to say, but that's the law, that's standard, that's the way it is. And there is no question that you have an obligation as the general counsel to raise risk or performance or ethics or legal issues with the board of great consequence, even though the CEO may not like that. And that creates the potential for tension. The way this is resolved is that both the board and the CEO have to want the general counsel to be a hitter, to play a big role outside of law, in addition to law, and to basically speak the truth as they see it for the good of the company. They don't control it. The board and the CEO, of course, make the decisions, but the general counsel has got to be a very strong voice, a voice of conscience, not the voice of conscience, but an important voice of conscience in the company.
So how would you respond to this? I'd say 8 years ago, I did a study, and I asked sitting GCs who they were ultimately responsible to, and they had a choice of 3: board of directors, the CEO, or the corporation. Do you know that 50% didn't answer corporation in that? So it's either my question wasn't clear or...
I think things have changed. I think the quality, one of the parts of the revolution is that the quality and stature and skills of the general counsels and the inside lawyers, the specialists and the generals, has vastly increased compared to where it was 30 years ago when I started. They understand the answer to that question, and they know that they represent the corporation, and they know that that can create tensions, both with the CEO and sometimes with individual board members, because they don't represent the individual board members either. They represent the company and the board as the representative of the company, but not individuals.
Yeah. So explain to me, one of the things I didn't understand completely was the business and society issues. So explain that to me.
In this day and age, whether it's regulation, legislation, enforcement, investigations, ethical demands by the NGOs, proposals that are all over the place, if you are in, they have a huge impact on what the company can do in a global sense. And think of it this way. If you're in 100 countries, and a lot of companies now are all over the world, and each of those countries has got at least a federal and local dimension, and maybe sometimes federal, state, and local, you are facing an enormous welter of laws, regulations, enforcement actions, and so that very much dictates what the company can do. The general counsel and his team are presumably very skilled at helping the corporation navigate those shoals. And if you can't navigate those business and society shoals these days, you're not going to get it done. Let me give you another example. Let's take China. China's not a rule of law, it's rule of men. People go to China, used to go to China when I was working at General Electric, and they wouldn't know anything about how the government was organized or how the society was organized. They thought they were just going to go and sell widgets. No way. I won't put the word in between, no way. But they couldn't do it. They had to be much more sophisticated about the society. That's true whether you're in Western Europe, whether you're in China, whether you're in India, whether you're in Africa, wherever you are. Having a deep understanding of the political culture, the legal system, the ethical norms is critical to doing business successfully. And that's why the general counsel, as I said, has really become a peer of the CFO in the company, and why if you look in the high five of many major companies now, in terms of the most compensated individuals, the general counsel is among those 5.
Yeah, it's no surprise to me. I've always been a big advocate of what role general counsel has played, and I also think that they would make great board members, and boards of yesteryear never wanted to get 2 attorneys on a board, but I actually think they've got so much experience.
I don't think they should be on, they certainly should not be on the board of their own companies.
Oh, right.
But whether they should be on the board of other companies, if their company has a practice where officers can be directors in other companies, then of course they should be as well.
So let me ask you, obviously our majority of our audience are board members, so what is the board's role in supporting the GC in their efforts to try and create this?
Well, there are many roles for the board. The board is absolutely critical. First of all, they have to have the vision of the partner guardian and the lawyer statesman. The lawyer statesman means that the first question is legal, but the last question is it right for the corporation, and that's against the standards of performance, integrity, and risk. So they have to have that vision, which has to be communicated to the CEO so that the CEO shares that vision. That's number one. Number two, they ought to have the general counsel be part of the board culture. Sometimes, in many cases, the general counsel is the secretary and will be at board meetings, but the general counsel should also go to the board outings, the board dinners, the board trips, so that he has or she has a personal relationship and is part of the culture of the board and really understands that. Third, they basically should both hire and fire. Although it is a CEO choice, The board should absolutely be involved in the last selection between the candidates. Probably should interview the general counsel before hired, and they also ought to be informed before the general counsel is hired, because sometimes they can be fired for the right reasons and sometimes they can be fired for the wrong reasons, and the board ought to be a check on that. I think even more controversially, the board should have the general counsel report privately to them twice a year. They have to institute that. If the general counsel institutes it, he loses the trust of the CEO. But if the board says, we want to talk to you privately, we really want to understand what's happening, that can be a very valuable thing. They do that with the outside auditors, they do that with the internal audit staff, they should do it with the general counsel as well. It's tricky. There's tension in all these relationships, and the key is to have a general counsel, a board, and a CEO who believe in this model and can make it work, notwithstanding the inevitable tensions that are going to exist.
Well, that's just great advice. And, you know, as many times as we've spent time together, I don't ever think there's been a time where I haven't come away learning something. So I really appreciate that. I think it's important. How can people get a copy of the book?
The book is available on Amazon. It's available through Barnes & Noble. And it actually is also available through the American Bar Association. It's published by the trade imprint of the American Bar Association. So you can go to any of those sites and find it, and you should be able to find it in book stores as well, if any bookstores still exist.
Yeah. Well, Ben, as always, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. It's always a pleasure. And before we leave, just a reminder for those of you who are connected with compensation committees or HR people, Equilar's annual Executive Compensation Summit is going to be held on June 20th to the 22nd in Boston. I will be there. I have the pleasure of interviewing Dan Gallagher, the former SEC commissioner, which should be very interesting. And it's something to look into, and I know you'll enjoy it. I go to it every year. So with that, I hope you enjoyed today's edition. We'll be back again next week when we take a look at another critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.